Ancient years have passed, and yet, the heavens still echo with the untold mysteries of a war that predates time itself. A war that did not begin on earth, nor among men, but in the highest realms, before the first breath of humanity, before the first kingdom rose, before even the stars were scattered into the void. A rebellion unlike any other. A defiance that shook the very foundations of the celestial order. And at the center of it all was one name, Lucifer, the morning star, once clothed in divine radiance, now cast into the abyss. But why? Why would a God of infinite power allow such a traitor to continue existing? Why didn't he erase him from eternity the moment he turned against the throne? And if God truly reigns supreme, why does evil still crawl through the earth, poisoning the hearts of men, shaping empires, whispering through kings? For centuries, mankind has sought answers. Scriptures have spoken in veiled warnings, prophets have glimpsed shadows of truth, but the full revelation remains a mystery. The battle was not over when Lucifer fell, it had only just begun. The divine plan, the test of humanity, the cosmic struggle that binds heaven and earth in a war unseen. What if everything we've ever known is only a fragment of a far greater reality? Brace yourself, for this is a journey into the unseen. The hidden laws that govern the fate of angels and men alike. The reason why God cannot kill Satan or the fallen ones. But to truly uncover this mystery, we must step beyond the surface, into the forbidden corridors of time. Do you seek the truth? Then subscribe to our channel and encourage us in advancing these hidden revelations about the Bible. For only by walking through the shadows can we begin to understand the light. The war is far from over, and the greatest battle is yet to come. Before time was counted and before the stars were scattered across the heavens, the throne room of eternity stood in divine brilliance. It was here that the first rebellion was whispered, and the first sin was conceived. The celestial hosts, vast in number and purity, sang praises that echoed across the cosmos. But among them was one whose heart darkened with ambition, Lucifer, the morning star. In a moment unseen by mortal eyes, Lucifer's voice rose among the angels, challenging the sovereignty of the Almighty. His words, laced with eloquence, swayed a third of heaven's hosts. They saw in his defiance not rebellion but liberation, not treachery but truth. And so the war in heaven began, a war that was not fought with swords of fire but with the decree of divine justice. God, in his infinite wisdom, did not strike Lucifer down as easily as one might expect. Instead, he cast him and his followers out of heaven, but he did not annihilate them. Why? Why did God, who created all things, not simply erase Satan's existence? That question would haunt the ages, and its answer would unravel in the trials of humanity. Lucifer fell, but he did not fall alone. His legions, once clothed in celestial radiance, now bore the scars of exile. The once magnificent beings, now fallen, found themselves in a realm unlike anything they had known before. A world between worlds, neither heaven nor hell. Their wings, though not clipped, no longer carried them into the presence of the Almighty. Anger burned in their hearts. If they could not reign in heaven, they would reign elsewhere. But even in their defiance, they understood a terrifying truth. God had allowed them to exist. If he had the power to destroy them, why hadn't he? Was it mercy, or was there something they did not understand? Lucifer, now called Satan, the adversary, knew that the war was far from over. His fall was not an end but a beginning. He turned his gaze toward the new creation, toward Earth, where the first humans walked in innocence. A new battlefield awaited. Deep in the unseen realm, a meeting was called. The fallen angels, now rulers of shadows, gathered in secrecy. Their leader stood before them, his voice carrying an unnatural weight. The Almighty has chosen patience, but patience is not eternity, Lucifer declared. If he will not end us, then we will prove to him that we are beyond redemption. We will turn his beloved creation against him. The council murmured. Some questioned if they had already sealed their fate. Others whispered of a second war, one that would not be fought in the heavens but in the hearts of men. Among them, one fallen angel stepped forward. But what if this is his plan? What if he is using us, even now? Lucifer's expression did not change, but the fire in his eyes dimmed for a fleeting moment. The thought was dangerous. If God still had control over them, even in their rebellion, then their war was futile. And yet, the alternative that they had a chance to win was far more intoxicating. Eden was untouched, perfect in its divine craftsmanship. Every leaf, every breath of wind, bore the mark of its creator. And at the center of it all were two beings, Adam and Eve. Lucifer did not approach with fire or fury. He came in whispers, in reason, in carefully chosen words. The serpent's tongue wrapped around Eve's doubts, around her curiosity. Did God really say? The question echoed like a chime in her mind. At that moment, a cosmic shift occurred. Humanity, the pinnacle of creation, was given a choice. And when Eve took the fruit, when Adam followed, the weight of that choice shattered the world. Satan did not celebrate. He did not need to. He simply watched as the curse unfolded, as the first humans trembled in shame, as God's voice thundered through the garden. The war had truly begun. With the fall of man, something changed. The earth groaned under the weight of sin. But there was one thing Lucifer had not anticipated: God's patience. The Almighty did not destroy humanity, just as he had not destroyed the fallen angels. Instead, he set things in motion. Prophecy, promise of redemption. Lucifer scoffed at the words spoken in Eden. A child of the woman would one day crush his head. But who? When? He had time. And time, for now, was his greatest weapon. The fallen ones had hoped for immediate victory, but they soon realized the war was not so simple. There were laws, ancient decrees woven into creation itself. Even in their rebellion, they could not break them. They could not take human life without permission. They could not undo what had been spoken by the Creator. They could tempt, deceive, manipulate, but they could not destroy freely. Lucifer, though powerful, was still bound by the word of God. And that infuriated him. One of his followers, Azazel, raged. "We are gods among men. Why does he restrain us still?" "Because we are not free," Lucifer admitted. Not truly. The realization was terrifying. Even in their fall, they were still under God's control. But there had to be a way. A loophole. It was in the days of Noah that the fallen made their most desperate move. If they could not destroy man, they would corrupt him beyond saving. They took flesh, walking among men, taking wives, creating something new, the Nephilim. Giants, warriors, unnatural beings that blurred the line between heaven and earth. If God would not destroy them, perhaps he would have no choice but to destroy the world itself. And for a time, it seemed to work. The flood came. Humanity was wiped clean. But as the waters receded, Lucifer realized the worst truth of all. God had not given up on mankind. The war was far from over. After the flood, the world was reset. The Nephilim were no more. Humanity had a new beginning. But the fallen had not vanished. They lingered in shadows, waiting, watching. Satan pondered. If brute force could not win, perhaps subtlety could. It was time for a different approach. He would whisper through kings. He would move through empires. He would make mankind believe that God was absent. And so, the next phase of his plan began. A new world rose from the floodwaters. The earth, once cleansed, was now teeming with life again. Noah's descendants spread across the land, forming clans, tribes, and eventually kingdoms. But as men built their cities, they also built altars. Some to the Almighty, but many to other gods, gods who whispered in the darkness. Satan watched in silence, his influence unseen but ever present. He no longer needed to walk in the garden or take on the form of a serpent. Now, men sought after him without realizing it. They built towers to the heavens, crafted idols of gold, and dedicated sacrifices to unseen forces. One kingdom in particular caught his attention: Babel. It was a city of ambition, ruled by a man whose name would be etched in history, Nimrod. Nimrod was unlike other men. He was mighty, a warrior whose strength and charisma drew others to him. He was not merely a king, he was a leader of rebellion. And Satan saw in him something familiar, a heart that desired power above all else. One night, as Nimrod gazed at his city from the highest tower, a voice spoke to him from the shadows. "You were not meant to serve," it whispered. "You were meant to rule." The words sank deep into Nimrod's soul. He clenched his fists, staring at the heavens. "Then why does he restrain us?" he muttered. A low chuckle echoed through the night air. "Because he fears what you can become." The idea took root in Nimrod's heart. If they could build a tower that reached the heavens, they would be equal to God. No longer would they be bound by his laws. They would be gods themselves. And so the Tower of Babel rose. It was not just a monument of stone and brick. It was a declaration, a challenge to the Almighty. But Nimrod did not understand what he was truly doing. The power behind his throne was not his own. He was merely a pawn, another piece in a game much older than humanity itself. Satan watched as the people of Babel labored, their chants filling the air. He did not need to command them. Their ambition was enough. They believed they were free, but they were bound by something far darker, pride. Then, suddenly, something happened that Lucifer did not expect. The Almighty intervened. A wind, unseen but mighty, swept through the city. The workers stopped, their voices breaking into confusion. Words that had once united them now divided them. One man spoke, but his brother no longer understood. Another called out in panic, realizing his own tongue had changed. The curse of Babel had begun. Panic spread like wildfire. The people, once united in rebellion, turned against one another. They could not communicate, could not build, could not continue. And in an instant, Satan's plan unraveled. He watched in disbelief as the tower was abandoned, as men scattered across the earth, their unity shattered. For the first time since the fall, a terrible realization struck him. God was not idle. The world changed, but the war remained. Though Babel fell, the fallen ones did not. They slithered into the cultures of men, embedding themselves in the very fabric of civilization. Nations were born, each with its own gods, its own rituals. Egypt, Babylon, Assyria, empires rose under the influence of those who lurked in the shadows. Lucifer no longer sought to defy God openly. He did not need to. Instead, he did something far more insidious. He made men forget. He whispered new names for his kind, made idols in their images, turned them into deities to be worshipped. They were no longer fallen angels in the eyes of man. They were gods: Marduk, Baal, Ashtoreth, Molech. The deception was complete. Yet, through it all, God remained patient. He allowed it. Satan could not understand why. Why did God permit false gods to be worshipped? Why did he let men stray so easily? It was only later that he realized the truth. God was waiting for something far greater than the kingdoms of men, waiting for something that would change everything. Satan felt it before he saw it. Prophecy, a whisper in the wind. From the lineage of Abraham a child would come, a king unlike any other, one who would crush the head of the serpent. Lucifer had heard those words before, spoken in Eden, a promise that haunted him through the ages. He had assumed the flood had erased that prophecy, that perhaps in some way he had altered destiny itself. But no, it still lingered, and so he did what he had always done. He corrupted. He whispered into the ears of kings, urging them to slaughter the children of Israel. He moved through Pharaoh, convincing him to enslave God's chosen people. If the Messiah was to come through them, then they must not survive. The horrors of Egypt unfolded under his influence. Whips, chains, blood spilled on dry sand. And yet, once again, God did not stop him. Instead, he raised a deliverer, Moses, a single child, hidden in the reeds, carried by the current of destiny. Lucifer watched in frustration as the cycle continued. Each time he moved against God's plan, God countered in ways he never expected. It was not brute force. It was patience. And it terrified him. Because if God was patient, it meant he was certain of the outcome. And that meant Lucifer was already doomed. But he would not give up. If he could not destroy the Messiah before he was born, he would destroy him after. He would use betrayal, temptation, doubt, whatever it took. The war was far from over. It was only just beginning. The world turns, empires rise and fall, and yet through every shift in history, an unseen force weaves its way through the corridors of power. Lucifer and his fallen ones do not sit idly in the shadows. They move with purpose, their influence stretching far beyond what the human eye can perceive. Since Babel, their strategy has changed. No longer do they openly challenge God's throne as they did in heaven. Instead, they manipulate from within, shaping civilizations, bending the will of kings, corrupting laws, and luring the hearts of men into darkness, all while hiding behind the illusion of free will. It began subtly. Nations turned from the true God, worshipping idols fashioned from wood and stone. But those idols were never just symbols. They were thrones. Thrones upon which the fallen spirits sat, receiving the sacrifices of men, feeding on their loyalty, twisting their destinies. In Egypt, the gods of the Nile demanded the blood of the innocent. In Canaan, the worship of Molech required the burning of children as offerings. In Babylon, the people turned to astrology, seeking guidance from the stars instead of their creator. And yet, none of them understood they were not merely worshipping false gods. They were worshipping beings who once stood before the Almighty, beings who now desired only destruction. The whispers of the fallen dictated the laws of nations, embedding themselves in the cultures of men. They taught war, they taught oppression, they taught perversion, and worst of all, they taught false religion. If they could not turn men away from God completely, they would do something even worse. They would corrupt his name. False prophets arose, claiming to speak for the Almighty, yet twisting his words. The laws of righteousness were buried beneath traditions forged by the hands of demons. The fallen ones made sure that even those who sought truth would stumble upon lies. But why? Why would God allow such deception to take hold? Lucifer knew the answer. God was patient, too patient, and that patience terrified him, because it meant God was waiting for something Lucifer had not yet seen. If the fallen could not destroy mankind outright, they would do the next best thing. They would corrupt its blood. Long ago, they had tried it before the flood, when they took human wives and bore unnatural offspring, the Nephilim, giants of unnatural power, abominations that nearly wiped humanity from existence. But the flood had reset the world. The Nephilim were no more, and yet, something remained. Somehow, after the waters receded, traces of that ancient corruption still existed. Giants reappeared in Canaan, the Rephaim, the Anakim, the Zamzummim, creatures that bore the mark of the fallen ones. Had some of the Nephilim survived? Or had the fallen returned to repeat what they once did? One thing was certain. Wherever these bloodlines arose, they carried one mission: to stand against God's chosen people. From the Philistine champions like Goliath to the Canaanite warlords who defied Israel, these tainted bloodlines sought to prevent the fulfillment of God's promise. Because Lucifer knew, if the Messiah was to be born through the seed of a woman, then corrupting that seed could undo the prophecy entirely. But once again, God was patient, and as Israel rose under the leadership of Joshua, the bloodlines of corruption were hunted down, their remnants scattered. Lucifer watched as God cleansed the land once more. But he was not finished. If he could not change blood, he would change belief. With the Nephilim nearly eradicated, Lucifer turned to a new strategy: spiritual deception. He did not need giants or warriors. He needed kings. Kings who would willingly bow to the fallen. And so, the world entered an era of occult empires. Egypt, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome. Each of them carried within their halls the whispers of the fallen ones. Pharaohs, claiming to be divine, consulted spirits and performed blood rituals. Babylonian priests studied the movements of the stars, believing they could predict fate, unaware that the very spirits they worshipped were the ones shaping their destiny. Persian magi, skilled in sorcery, held councils with unseen beings who granted them knowledge not meant for men. Greece, with its pantheon of gods, was nothing more than a repackaging of the fallen angels under new names. And Rome became the seat of power from which the fallen could reach the ends of the earth. The world was theirs, or so they thought, because through all of this, a lineage remained, a bloodline untouched by corruption, a promise that had not been forgotten. The Messiah was still coming, and Lucifer was running out of time. The moment he was born, all of hell trembled. The child of prophecy had arrived. Lucifer had known this day would come, but he had not expected it to happen this way. A virgin birth? A humble arrival? No palace, no army, no kingdom? It made no sense. Yet even as the baby lay in a manger, Lucifer knew the stakes had never been higher. This was the one who would crush his head, the one whose arrival had been foretold since Eden. And so the fallen moved quickly. Through Herod, they slaughtered the children of Bethlehem, hoping to snuff out the Messiah before he could rise. Through the religious leaders, they sowed jealousy, hatred, and fear, turning the very people he came to save against him. Through temptation, they offered him power, hoping to corrupt him as they had corrupted so many before. But none of it worked. Jesus of Nazareth was not like Adam. He did not waver. He did not fall. Even as he walked among men, Lucifer saw something he had never seen before, a power greater than his own. It was not brute strength. It was authority. Authority over sickness. Authority over the storm. Authority over demons themselves. Lucifer watched as his own followers trembled in fear at the presence of Jesus, begging him not to cast them away. And for the first time since his rebellion, Lucifer understood something terrifying. He was not in control. Not then. Not now. Not ever. And if this Messiah truly was who he claimed to be, then Lucifer's days were numbered.